Let's blame the iPhone, why don't we?
Yes. All right. So there we go. And they're saying the Skype bleep bloops are so catchy in the chat room. Let's bring you on here. There we go. Thanks so much, Jimmy, for joining us here today for this
Oh, absolutely.
for these discussions around software architecture. I know you've got a lot of great insight, and Julie said that you've got some long-standing blog posts on the topic. Can you give folks a quick introduction to yourself?
Oh, sure. Bogard, .NET developer here in Austin, Texas. I work for a small consulting company called Headspring, where mainly I just sold source systems for companies. I've been working in the web ASP.NET space for gosh, I guess since about it came out, I guess. So I've been privileged enough to see all the changes of the frameworks over the years.
Awesome.
And I'm here enjoying the lovely hot Austin weather.
Now, your network connections are getting a little fuzzy there on me.
Let's see.
Just want to double check that, because I know we're gonna do a little bit of live share here, and we want to make sure that we don't drop anything. We don't get too far off sync. Oh, I need to change hats while you're doing that. There we go. So we're going to switch to the Xamarin University hat.
Sure. It's like a NASCAR sort of thing.
Absolutely. Switching them out and all kinds of stuff here. Seg Falter is envious of my hat collection. It's not that as many as you might think, but I try to have a different hat each stream.
All right.
All right. When you are ready, go ahead and so we're going to take a look at a little bit of MediatR, and we wanted to talk, I think as part of that, I guess, a little bit about the concept of CQRS, right?
Yes. So what we'll do today is take a little bit of a history lesson, basically through my journey of learning about the CQRS pattern and how I've learned to apply it in my applications. But in order to do so, you kind of have to start before we had any kinds of concepts or patterns in place to see how we might arrive at those places. So that's what I want to do, is basically take you on my journey of how I got to where, and hopefully it'll make sense as it made sense to me over the years.
Awesome. All right. So we're going to share. I'm going to show my Visual Studio, and you're going to share a live share from your machine, right?
Yes.
All right.
So I'm going to start that up.
And while you're doing that, I am going to go to this view right there. Alrighty. So much sharing. Yes, absolutely, C17. There's a lot we're learning today, and I'm thrilled we're able to share so much with our folks here. All right. I'm going to grab that. So Jimmy sent me a link, and I'm using Visual Studio 2017. If you're using Visual Studio Code, you have the same Join Collaboration Session button here, and it automatically fills in the link because it sees it on the clipboard. And I'll click Join, and what Visual Studio will do is it'll now traffic that code back and forth between Jimmy's machine and mine, along with language services. So I don't even need to have C# and .NET installed. It'll just traffic those requests back and forth for us. Really cool stuff. All right, I am in, and I'm following you. Sounds
Okay.
good. All right.
All right. So, but what I have in my solution here is before and after. And because I'm not too clever with my sample apps before, from Microsoft normal documentation, build an application and with A4 and EF Core, it's using the Razor Pages way of doing things, which is what we're supposed to be using today, right, Jeff?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, all right. So, and not to pick on what because it's fine, and if I was building an app of that size, do it. like I said, I'm just good about making laugh, so I just picked something someone already else had. So in that application, and it does look quite a bit like the application I used to build before I started using these sort of patterns. So I wanted to dig into some of the examples in that first, kind of look at, see what is some, address some of those issues. So it's the Contoso University application. The general idea is that it's an application that lets you see lots of information about a university, including courses, instructors, the students, and departments. And it has enough going on to where those things are related to each other. So instead of just being a kind of a boring, something a little bit more interesting going on.
Okay. So interesting application, and we're going to start to migrate it to use some of these patterns.
So let's dig into some of these some sort of sample pages here. So I'm going to look at something simple first, which is just, in this case, it's a page that shows a list of departments. This is Razor pages, so we have a model class that inherits from the page model, the page model being the piece that ties into the Razor page itself. And this one doesn't look that exciting, right? I'm just showing a list of departments on a screen, so it's a fairly simple thing to do, where I say, go to the DB context, go to the departments, and because I'm showing some administrative information, don't break this, otherwise you'll have problems perhaps. Then finally do it to be able to put it on the page model.
Hang on, let me interrupt you 1 second. We're still having a little bit of problem with your sound. Why don't we turn off your webcam? See if that helps a little bit here. And which page is it that you're looking at right now?
I am looking at the departments index page in the Kentucky University-MS.
All right. I am. It's downloading it right now. Yeah, the network is giving us a little bit of a problem here. Yeah, go ahead and shut off your webcam. Let's see if that helps.
All right. No one wants to look at my face anyway. That's fine.
There we go. All right, and I'm trying to find you.
All right, so I'm at the other Contoso University project there, Jeff. There's a second one.
Oh, the integration tests?
No, there's a Contoso University-MS docs project.
I don't see that one. Right?
I don't see it on yours either. Very curious.
Let's try dropping the share and reestablishing it. Keep the share running. I'm going to disconnect and reconnect, just in case that was a network thing. But yeah, the folks in the chat room are saying, and I completely agree, sound got so much better.
It's the quietest room, but it's also the one furthest away from the Wi-Fi.
Okay. All right, let's see. So I see a Contoso University folder here. I see Contoso University integration tests and tools are the folders that I see.
Okay, there should be one that's Contoso University-MS docs as well. And if you can't see that, then what I wonder if I can just open that project by itself.
Yeah, let's try that.
Okay. So give me 1 second.
Mm-hmm.
And will I have a new session?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
And yeah, the folks in the chat room, I kind of agree. They're saying it looks almost like we were scoped to a different project folder.
Oh, yes. I was adding the project from a different disk, which is straight from the ASP docs repository. Okay. So I've got it open and take a second for it to
Yep, and then
load up.
And then restart the share, and we'll take a look. Now, Cowboy, I don't think we need to go to Visual Studio Code for this. It should be the same in both. Should be.
So in a normal kind of application, where I've got either MVC or like pages-based stuff, you typically everything being put on the Razor pages, it's on the on-get or on-post methods. So the Contoso from the MS doc basically shows exactly that, which is putting everything inside of the controller action. Not that there's anything wrong with that for simple applications, but I wanted to do that journey of what are some of the ways people try to refactor that into something different, and how does ours work? All right, so I sent you another link there.
Alrighty, I will grab that one, and here we go.
All right, so let's try this again.
All right, now I'm in a folder, it says, called CU, Contoso University MS Docs CS Proj. All right. There we go. Now we can see where you are in the index model.
Okay.
All right.
Technology. We're back. Okay. So looking at this page model, it's not doing anything really that exciting down in the on-get, where it's going into the DB context, into departments, DB sets, and then doing an include because we want to make sure and do the eager specific information to list that information or put in the actual page model itself. So this is kind of the most boring page we could probably have here, is just a single set of information. The most interesting thing, of course, dot include thing that's I always forget to do at least, and to make sure we do that eager fetching to load that information. So that's kind of a boring one. So let's look at something that's a little bit more interesting.
Okay.
So over in courses side, we have another index page. And so doing something a little bit more interesting in that it's looking a set of courses to include, but this time it has an as-no tracking. And the reason why we're doing that is because we don't want to, if anything changes, we don't want to have it accidentally saved for us. And change tracking is also expensive, so we want to try to turn that off on different. And the final one, I'll go to something extremely hairy, which is on our list of instructors. And this list of instructors, its page model is doing a lot. And so this one, I'm showing sort of a cascading information. I'm a set of instructors, but instructors can teach different courses. So you can click on an instructor and then show the instructor the courses taught by the instructor on that same page.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, so now I want to see the students for that course. So now you can click a course and then go to the students. So this sort of drill down capability on this page.
Yeah,
So
gosh, there's a lot going on there.
Yeah, this isn't even all of it because somewhere on here I'm actually pulling in. Oh yeah, just a lot of information I'm trying to pull in here. So there's the stuff that's easy to get wrong, which is all of this include stuff and the as-no tracking, and then once you're getting down to the actual information itself, it just becomes kind of tough to see what's all going on here.
Oh my gosh, yes.
So that's just my sort of my screens I'm just showing. The other one I have is like an edit screen for actually editing information. Okay, I'm going to the edit model for instructor page. This one starts to become pretty complicated as well. So looking at the on post async for edit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And looking at this, there's just a lot of stuff going on. So I have to do things like actually update the information that for the instructor. But then that allows them to actually edit the courses that instructor teaches. So it's quite a bit of stuff going on to be able to do any stuff. But what I'm saying is there's a lot of mixed concerns going on. I've got some validation going on at the top. The state's valid, then go ahead and just show the page again. There's a little bit of going on, so I have to pull the instructor out with some special includes. And then there's this try update model, updating very specific information. It's just a lot of stuff going on in this one.
Yeah, this one method is 30, 40 lines long. There's a lot of traffic going on here and a lot of stuff to unwind just to manage that edit operation for a course.
And the difficult part, you could say, well, we try some tests around this to make sure we're getting it right. But the problem is it's actually really hard to write a test kind of method because it's dealing with the sort of the user interface there. A lot of things that it's dealing with internals of MVC, and then there's the stuff I care about, which is really doing the actual updates and some of the business logic behind doing the work here. And so everything's kind of mixed together. So on our simple pages, it's really easy to do, but once things get complex, okay, how do we manage dealing with this kind of business logic? So this is where I go on the Wayback Machine to say, well, how would I have solved this like 6 or 7 or 8 years ago?
Rewinding there. Go ahead.
Oh man, I didn't know you had that.
Oh yeah, I've got a couple like that.
Okay, so if I was to rewind back then, I was really into all the domain-driven design. And back in those days, people were big into a lot of the kind of structural patterns behind DD. And the structural patterns code-specific things that you deal with. The interesting things like entities and aggregates and values, into them more kind of less pattern, things like repositories and services.
Right.
Back then, I would have refactored all this code into services and repositories to actually do the work. And so I did that on some very, very large projects. So projects like with almost 1,000 actions, we went down the path of refactoring all this code into their service that would do the updating this thing, and then that would call it to different repositories to do the work. And so business logic would kind of be sort of mixed between services, repositories, and my domain layer. And it's still kind of everything was mixed together. And so we'd wind up with something like, and actually I have one of my old repositories here I've grabbed. It looked at something like this. So I'm actually, there's a text file there called old repository.txt that I'm pulling.
Yep, there we go. I can see it. Oh my gosh.
So I didn't copy all of this because it's actually stretched way down below, so there's like 100 lines of this stuff. But it started out, like, this repository is meant to be the encapsulation layer over my ORM. For those just in case times where I may change up my ORM, because that happens all the time, right?
Right, and just to make sure, right, folks know ORM, that's the object relational model, something like Entity Framework or NHibernate that's mapping objects to the database.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this is lets me mock it out in a unit test, that sort of thing.
Sure.
But the problem is, since it's completely removed the object map from my, I actually need a lot of the power that ORM provides. So you started with something very simple like, well, in this case, it's some generic person repository, so I can get a person by ID. And I actually need information for some kind of processing. So I have get person ID for approvals and ID for rejections, because maybe those are pulling out different sets of information that object.
You're including different objects as part of that graph.
Exactly. Things that we saw earlier that we could just call .include in the Entity Framework DB context. In this case, available, I've wrapped it up in this repository thing, and I gigantic interface. So we took this whole pattern to its logical conclusion, took a step back, and this is insane. code any better. In fact, all of our unit tests make things much harder to change because they're so tied to the internal implementation details of my services and whatnot that it's actually really difficult to change. So we went through what I call a defactoring. So refactoring is like moving code into, moving code around to where we found ourselves in a hole. So we said, we're going to defactor this code. And we pulled all the code out of all the abstractions and just stuck it right back into our controller actions and page models.
Okay.
So, okay, let's take a step back and see what kind of, now that we've removed kind of the we thought we needed, what are the overall patterns of usage we see in our system to see where we should actually be building our abstractions and encapsulations. So taking a step back, I can see that something like a normal has two general kinds of actions it does. And these can be broken down into the HTTP methods that are used. So most web apps I use have basically two. There's HTTP gets, where I'm getting data, like we see here on my index. Even an edit page, some over on the edit page, has two complementary ones, where there's an initial get to show data, and then after that, there's then the post to then actually make some change. So there's gets and there's posts, and my application just basically does those things, gets and posts. And so if I remove the web from that picture, I'm either getting data or I'm changing. And these can be thought generally as I'm either querying for data or I'm issuing some sort of command to perform some action. So we looked at this and said, instead of us going towards repositories and services that have a lot of cross-cutting concerns that deal with both changes and queries, let's instead center around our system around this concept of commands and queries.
Okay.
So our system, instead of wrapping ourselves around these kind of layered abstractions, represents every request in terms of a query to do something, a request to do, or another request to perform some operation.
Right. So we have requests that are pretty much, or queries that are reading data, and commands that could be creating data, updating data, or even deleting. Those are different command types, I would think.
Exactly.
Okay.
And in our earlier MVC days, we'd already sort of centered around this concept of, instead of, in this case, like an editor, I'm taking an entity framework model and directly passing it over to you. Well, that entity model has a lot of junk on it connected. We're already doing this thing of creating individual view models for all of our views. And so the last piece was just to create some sort of request for each of those view models that represented the final output. So we had this journey. I'm just going to write some comments while that's coming up.
Sure.
So we had something like a query gets to some kind of code, and that comes into some kind of okay. Then we also have a command to do some kind of code, and then there's some kind of result, like pass, fail, or was done, wasn't done, or maybe there's no response at all. Maybe there's no result. It said yes, nothing to do. This kind of code that's the interesting of our application. That's like where the real work is done. But in this current code looking at, that important code is mixed up with all the other junk of the UI framework. So what I wanted to do was encapsulate that middle interesting part into something. That something initially was taking these two up, say this is some, and that goes to something that can handle that request. So that's some kind of color of request.
Okay. And
that's going to return some kind of response. So this is just request response. So the interface actually needs the other thing too. I have a handler that take a request, do the work, and return the response.
All right.
And that's pretty much it. I'll wait for your session here to catch up.
Quick question.
So if I look at,
do you have the Twitch video open there on your machine somewhere?
Yes.
Go ahead and you can go ahead and close that. That I'm sure is chewing up a ton of bandwidth.
Okay.
Because right, we're pushing high def video. We want to make sure we're giving you as much network to make the sound work really well here and all that. But I'm caught up there. I'm inside. I can see your cursor next to that response in the generic type.
Excellent. Okay. So looking at the query command, they're more generic patterns of request response where I'm requesting and getting some sort of response. So what MediatR does is just provides a library to make it easy to do that. Have
Awesome.
a request, go to a handler, get a response. And where CQRS is, I'm modeling my commands and queries as these requests, a request for data, like a query, or a request to do something like my command.
Okay.
In this case, let's just go ahead and add, see how easy it is to add MediatR to this project and build some pages to something. But actually, I may actually create a new project that's empty, and we'll see if that actually works. Okay. So it's easier to go with an empty project than from the Contoso one that has a bunch of junk. So I'm just going to create a blank ASP.NET Core, in this case 2.1 web application. It says Razor Pages, and we'll be adding a NuGet package, or NuGet for the fancy package for
MediatR.
Yes, and I pronounce it MediatR. A lot of other people pronounce it MediatR, like SignalR.
Sure.
You can kind of tell that's when I created the project, and those kind of naming conventions are popular. So if you don't like the name, blame David Fowler, because I just stole his idea.
Oh, there it was. All right, so I haven't seen the new project pop up yet on my side.
All right. So there's a base MediatR package that supports all sorts of different target frameworks, Net Standard 2.0, which is a bunch of things, as well as .NET 4 or 5 specifically, so if you have kind of older applications.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have any external dependencies either, so it's just a regular class library. And what we're doing is plugging in a way to find the right handler for that request.
Okay.
All right, do you see anything yet?
No, it's not popping up on my side. Did you open a new project, or did you add it to the solution?
I added to the solution, but what I can do instead is just add it to the existing Contoso University project, if that works okay.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so if you can still see my screen, I see you're still on. I've just got the Contoso University project open here. I'm going to go to Manage NuGet Packages, and there's a built-in one. There's kind of a default one called MediatR.
Mm-hmm.
But what we're going to be looking for is actually the extension for the ASP.NET Core Dependency Injection Framework. And by the way, I looked at the let's see, MediatR.extensions extensions.Microsoft.dependency injection. That's the one we're looking for.
Okay.
So what this one is the plugin for Microsoft's DI framework for ASP.NET Core, which I think is it's called the Microsoft Extensions Injection.
Yeah, I think that's the library it's in. Yeah.
Yeah, it needs to be better. Like Unity. Unity was easy. This is harder. Okay. Okay, so we're gonna install this package, and this will also blend MediatR as well.
Now I'm gonna peek inside. You know what? I can't look in the CS project file. Rats.
Oh.
Oh, maybe I can. Downloading it right now.
Oh, awesome.
There we go. All right, I don't see the updates yet from your install, but I expect to see those in a minute here when it finishes doing the install.
So that library there is what bridges Microsoft's DI with MediatR, so that I can do all the dependent injection-y stuff inside my application, and it defines and locates the handlers requests. To actually initialize that, and I'm back in startup.cs now.
Okay. So you're adding MediatR to configure services, right? This is the place where we normally configure dependency injection.
Yes. So what I'm doing here is telling, just like there's services.add deep context, services.add MVC. These are adding a bunch of dependencies and registrations to the service collection. So what this is doing is I am calling services.add MediatR, and it's looking at the assemblies I'm passing in to find all of the interesting things that MediatR cares about, which right now is going to be handlers. So it's finding all of the different handlers and registering those handlers with the service collection.
Okay. Okay.
So once I have that one set of configuration, the next thing I need to do is just declare my requests, declare my responses, declare my handlers, and anytime I want to actually call into it, actually, invoke a handler,
sure, then
I'll be using a special interface from MediatR, which is the actual MediatR, which is spelled correctly as opposed to my clever way of doing it.
Instead of MediatR.
Yes, MediatR, yes.
To be explicit about. All right.
So in my controller, for example, I would declare an MediatR dependency.
Okay.
Oops.
And you're popping that using statement on there. Okay.
And I get that MediatR, and this time I can send requests. So I actually need a request. So I can do public class edit request, which is an I request for some kind of response. So filter it. And I need an edit response, which is just a POCO, whatever I want it to be. This is my edit response. My request class implements this interface for iRequest of the response type. And this is just kind of a helper thing so that we know how to tie in requests to responses. The general idea is that any given request in my system should be unique, and therefore have a unique response as well. I typically don't share responses between different requests. This is also a helper, so I know that when I'm making this request, this is the response I'm going to get.
Okay.
The final thing is to get a handler. So I create a class for the handler, edit handler, which is a iRequest handler of the request type, which is edit request, and the response type was edit response. And inside of here, this MediatR defaults to async, so you're going to get this syntax, which is not directly request response, but instead is you get the request object, you get a cancellation token because some people care about that sort of thing, and then you're returning a task of response. So if you're doing kind of like async await stuff, you can just await. If it's more synchronous, there's some helper classes to help you with that, return task of that type. So in this case, I can just do return task from result new edit response, and you can fill it in with the junk that you want. So once I've declared my handler and I start the application, MediatR looks for all of my request handlers of these different request and response type. So in this case, it will scan and find, oh, you got this request handler, so that in my actual action, I'm not calling into the handler itself or depending on it directly. Instead, I'll do something like var response equals MediatR dot send, and I'm going to send the request. So in this case, I'm going to send
a new edit request. This doesn't have anything in there, but typically, once we switch over to the other application, I'll show you how to actually live with everything encapsulated. So this response, in some generic foo, is an edit response. Oh, I would do await.
Right.
Await. There we go. Edit response. So whatever this is doing behind the scenes, I don't care. That's encapsulated inside of this handler. The important thing is I have this strongly typed POCO request object and some strongly typed object on the way out. And any kind of the interesting business logic are the things that I'm going to be pulling and that we've created over here.
Okay.
At this point, I think it might be good to switch over to the full example to go through what that looks like in contrast with this.
Okay. So I think we need to then restart the sharing session.
All right, so I'll end over here.
There we go. And the comment from Ashley in the chat room is, it's very tidy. It's so tidy. I kind of agree.
That's
right. You've got very fixed, right? Very, very tidy, very concise, right? This is only what we're concerned about. All right. And I'll join that collaboration session.
So I'll start with some of the simple examples and work ourselves up to the more complicated ones. So some of the simple examples we looked at were just showing a list of data. Like here's a list of instructors, or here's a list of students.
Right.
Looking at like the list of departments. Oh, wrong one. Looking at the list of departments.
Which page are you on? Just make sure.
I'm on the departments index page.
There we go. I got you. All right. Oh my gosh.
Okay.
Already I can see a huge change here. Just taking in a mediator on your constructor right there on line 19. And you're on get, it's a fat arrow function. It's now just mediator send.
Yes. This is what I like to see, which is, we'll get to some ones that are more complicated than this, because there are times you need to do like UI specific things. Like if you need to add toaster pop-ups or temp data, weird stuff like that. Your get actions do become, or post actions do become more complicated. However, I find that with Mediator, I've encapsulated the business logic-y stuff into its own class, and now on get or controller action are just the user interface portion, and that's it. So this for most of the time becomes super and simple. So what I'm doing here is saying I've encapsulated, in this case it's showing a list of departments, and so I've encapsulated the request to do so in a query, and so that's in line 26. There's a query request, and the response is a list of this model.
Okay.
This model is something I've built for this one individual screen, and the general idea is that I built this one screen for the individual model, and so I can sort of net that model inside of this overall page class. So I've got a query, a model, and then the data being bound to on the screen. So all of my pages now just have like here's the model that is going to be bound to for your screen.
Now, your request object, you don't have any properties for that. It's just an iRequest specifying it returns a list of type model. If we were querying for a specific object on a details page, would that be a property that you would pass into that request object?
It could be. So I'm looking now at the details page now that you brought it up. So in this case, I've got the same kind of thing with an onGet. But this time, my query is actually just going through model binding. So the ID is a property on that request object.
Oh my gosh.
That's a model bound parameter that just comes. So again, it's here's my query that's bound through model binding. I send the request down, and this is the response coming back. That is just a single data property. So this is why like Radio's pages got really excited, because everything becomes very single responsibility and encapsulated. So like this is just the request. This is just the query for this one page inside of this one page model. And just this one model is built for this one scene.
So
if I change this model, it only affects this one page and nobody else.
You've literally got your view model as a private class, right? As an inner class of the Razor page, and it's only on the page model class of the page that it's presenting. It's not floating around out there somewhere else. I know exactly where it is because for the page model, it's inside of it. That's really cool to see. Oh my gosh.
This was difficult for me because I used to try to like read code so that I can get a lot of use. The problem is reuse introduces coupling between the different places that are called. So I said, forget that. Reuse is now a 4-letter word or 5-letter, but 4-letter word, where I'm reusing concepts, request response, but in terms of the actual business logic, I'm trying as much as possible not to reuse the business logic because I don't want to introduce business logic coupling across different requests. So
sure.
even the request and response types are specific to this one single page. The request type has no data part of it. It presents a unique request for data based on that request type.
Okay.
Okay, so
now there's a follow-up question here from Ashley. Do your models have to be the question is, do they have to be classes or could they also be structs? Could we have value types here?
So you can you have to be super careful about that. If I'm using structs for things that get serialized or for things that get model bound, it's open to this of what those things support. So for model binding doesn't support fields, which is it's not something we tried it and then it broke. So I try not to get too clever. I mean, it supports it, but I try not to get too clever about those sort of things, and just stick with the default netty things, which is classes right now.
Okay.
It doesn't support tuples now either. So if you want to do those tuples that are coming in C# 11.7 or something.
Not 11. Come on now. But these classes should dispose. Yeah. They should be released quickly and easily by .NET, right? These get disposed quickly. They're not maintaining a lot of memory here. We shouldn't have too much of a performance concern with those as reference objects out there. Yes,
it's not something that's the first time someone's ever asked me about that. Not to say it's not an invalid question. I never had to worry about that, and maybe that's just the kind of systems I deal with. Most of the systems I deal with are like our back-end, like run the world sort of systems. Just end users, like back-end users see. So if I had to deal with that sort of thing, I'd probably look a lot harder on a lot of different things the way I've done this. So we haven't actually seen a handler, so I wanted to show that real quick to see how it looks differently than what we have today. So our handler in our index page, which is showing something very small. In this case, I'm basically taking the interesting code that was inside controller act on get async. I don't know what else to call that method. The page method, and putting it inside of here with a few extra things to make my life easier. So I also my library automapper, and in this case, what we're seeing is me using projections to project from the DB set from Entity Framework into directly. So what the previous Entity Framework code we would have seen here would be something like, go get the department, include this other thing, and then do a toList async. Or maybe do no tracking because we don't want to do the no. So what this does, this project to from automapper actually skips all of that stuff and uses this replaces dot from link. So you can just do like dot select and then do some junk. So that's when you do a select projection with most ORMs, they'll actually translate that into very specific SQL so that I project directly from the SQL directly into my model object, skipping the entity model altogether. I don't have to do like .include or no tracking or anything like that anymore, because it's smart enough to see what I'm projecting and know how to make the SQL query to do exactly what I want. And now in this, I've actually included menu profilers, so you can actually see the queries that are going on behind the scenes.
Okay.
I don't know how well that's going to work for us because of the live sharing, but as you pull this kind of code down, actually the queries, you'd actually see like nothing up my sleeve. It's just translating this into a select link query projection, and the ORM does all the work to figure out how to turn that into SQL and go straight to my DTO. So my handlers are still pretty simple. In this case, what I'm doing is I'm doing a project to our mapper configuration, so it knows how to do that translation for us behind the scenes. But I don't have to again worry about any of that weird thing the include syntax that I just always screw up and always forget to put something somewhere and mess up. This knows how to just inspect the mapping configuration based on my automation that I have here.
Okay.
And knows how to line everything up. So for example, my model has administrator full name. That's actually administrator dot full name. There's an administrator on the department object, but AutoMapper knows how to jam everything together. So I found that with these CQRS result type objects and using projections with AutoMapper, it makes it super, super easy. So I don't have all this manual projection code going on everywhere.
Awesome. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So very consolidated, very, very focused. A request handler with a handle, and there's our one database query, and returning it using AutoMapper with that project to makes perfect sense to me. My gosh. Composing things back into that view model that we do need, we do want to present.
So I pulled over to a more interesting one, which is the edit page.
Okay.
The edit page is a command, so it's a do something. So the command has two complementary actions. There's the get and the post. And the interesting thing is, typically for that, I'm binding up the form some kind of object, right? It's like I take the query, I build a view model to make the form. When it hits submit, then all that HTTP request form information then gets model bounded to something that then I act on. And so what I do in kinds of situations, and I'm on the edit model now, is I'll have a query that is a request for the command. And the command is the form I show on the screen. And when it hits submit, that same command is what actually gets bound up. So I'm on line 21. You see the same command that I show on the screen is also the same one that gets bound up on the other side of the request as well.
Okay. So
it's a duality.
Yeah. So Sahid in the chat room asks a very good question. Where do you do your validation here?
Oh, yes. Just scroll down because I'm using another library called Fluent Validation. But I'm very much in the camp of you validate actions, you don't validate entities. Because by the time I've set things on an entity, I've already mutated it, and I can't do this sort of before and after. Like, well, they can only do this operation if this thing is in this certain state. So you can do those kind of things kind of with data annotations validation. I still use that for like simple sort of stuff. But by centering around these like request objects, I can use a Fluent Validation, which provides these validation classes for a validator of type T.
Okay.
And now my T is the request object that I'm trying to validate. So even the validator is now inside of my page model, so that everything related to this request directly inside of my my page. So in this case, if it was data annotations validation, I would just decorate myself. In this case, I'm using Fluent Validation, so all my rules to do stuff are on my validator for that one specific command.
Now, and where is that validator on that you've defined here on line 54? Where is that applied to the command?
That is in my startup.
Oh, okay.
And in my startup, I have a couple things. One is adding Fluent Validation. This is getting into the land of things you can do now that you've separated your application to request responses. Now I can do Fluent Validation for all of my requests. I build validators for each individual request. The validation changes it only affects that one single page. I don't have to worry about, ooh, I accidentally rule that breaks some page way over somewhere else. Like, no, I only build the validators specific to each individual request.
Okay.
If there's reuse validation, then you can just do that basically like, base classes or interfaces and things like that.
So
but what I'm trying to do is validate before it gets to my entity model. Yes.
So we're running out of time here. But this is huge. I'm already seeing folks in the chat room saying, "Oh, I can't wait to try this with another open source project." And I love seeing all the stuff around the validation. What are the big takeaways that we should have when and how should we apply? Not how. We've seen some of the how. When do we make the decision that says, you know what? Yes, I want to bring in MediatR. I want to bring in the CQRS pattern and start applying it to a project.
If you look at this, it's not terribly interesting. Like, I can get away with not having any kind of logic because there's 4 controllers and half a dozen or a dozen pages, something like that.
Sure.
That's basically the threshold for me. Is once I hit that threshold of maybe a few actions, my application, things are getting serious. Like I'm actually having to maintain this thing over time, and that's a trigger for me to start encapsulating my system to commands and queries. Even if those commands and queries, it makes it so much easier to reason about my application, my system, when everything is through these individual requests and my responses. Testing's easier. Any kind of petty concern, I don't even show it, but it's easier. I've got a logger for every single request and response in my system, and I have the actual request and the actual response. That's something MediatR can provide.
Oh, awesome.
So that once things just cross over, okay, this is no longer kind of a boring CRUD app. Now it's doing something interesting. That's when I look at MediatR. For most of my applications, though, like I already know it's going to be complicated. So the first few screens, maybe I'll just lay the groundwork ahead of time to put those sort of costs in place, so I don't have to go refactor that sort of junk later.
Awesome. Now, is this source code, is this available on a GitHub repository of yours so we can pass that link along to some of our friends in the chat room, some of our viewers?
Yeah, so it's at github.com/jbogard, and I have a number of different Contoso University repositories instead of there, basically for every kind of flavor of the sample app that Microsoft put out. So if you want to see the MVC, it's there. There's also one for the Razor pages. So there's a Contoso University .NET Core -pages repository after what we're seeing.
Cool. All right. So do me a favor. Drop those links either into our chat or into an email, and I'll make sure they get attached to this video, so all of our viewers out there on YouTube or here on Twitch can take a look and dig in further and experiment a little bit with this example. This is really cool stuff. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it.
All right, and I'm going to say goodbye to Jimmy now. Take care. Thank you very much for joining us. These folks, they're looking at some of the projects we're working on stream, and they're saying we've got to try using MediatR with this wiki project we're working on in particular. So you've really inspired some folks here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks again.
All right, I'll catch you later. And there we go. Jimmy is out. I'm going to go back to just me here. All right. Thanks so much to Jimmy. That's really cool stuff that he showed us there. I am thrilled that he shared all that with us. And even though network wasn't working too well there, I think we learned a lot. I think we saw a lot from his code that he was sharing.